Bitcoin is getting that. We are becoming an aircraft carrier. And when you see us flip gold, we're going to be like a battleship. We're going to be cruising along, and it's going to take a lot to move our market up and down. Volatility will compress. A CAGR of 55% over the next 10 years, I definitely could see that without any problem at all. Well, if you're going to interact there, you must have a node. If you're saying, well, I don't have a node, well, guess what? That means you're using somebody else's node. What is Bitcoin? Is Bitcoin money? In my mind, it is. It's the most important monetary invention in the history of man, and we have to win. You know, we can't lose this battle. When you put your grandma's, face on Bitcoin, you're burdening people in the future. For the people that have been in a position of power and privilege for a long period of time, their term is ending. Bitcoin is not for the faint of heart. And the good news is that most Bitcoiners are not faint of heart. We are a warrior class.
Hi, George. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm pumped to do this. It's going to be a great session here. I mean, I'm ready to rip. We've got a lot to talk about. I'm excited. It's terrific to be in Prague. I'm having a wonderful time. This is a great event. It's small, intimate. I get to meet people and talk to them in person. I get to have a beer, which I'm going to do right now. And the Czech beer, I don't know if you haven't been here, anybody, but man, the Czech beer is just at a different level. I mean, it really is good. And they've brought me down a Pilsner made here in the Czech Republic. So cheers to you, my friend.
I think cheers.
Cheers.
That's like a well-known brand. I think, I don't know, is it well-known also in the States?
I don't know. I don't know because you have to, it's all imported and stuff. But anyway, I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Before we get started with all the topics, I'm aware there's like always a few people that might not know you, might not know your story. Give us some small background overview of like who you are and why you're excited about Bitcoin.
Well, first off, this is not financial advice today because I do not have a degree in finance at all. I'm just an ordinary 80 IQ pleb. I don't have any training or background in finance other than the fact that I'm self-taught and I've spent a lot of time at it. I've got a different kind of a background. I'm an ex-cop. I'm an ex-miner, underground miner, oil field worker. I worked in the oil fields out west back in the 70s and 80s when we had an oil boom in this country after the petrodollar, which is an interesting story too. And then after I drifted down into Colorado and was mining there, I drove a cab. Then I had actually dropped out of high school, and then I dropped out of college. But eventually I went back to college, and I was very fortunate timing-wise. I'd always loved flying. The Navy needed pilots at the time, and I applied, and surprisingly enough, they accepted me, although I had to go through a program to become an officer. I was just a nobody off the street, and it was called AOCS, which it was an interesting program run by Marine DIs, and so you'd go down there, you'd show up, they'd shave your head, and kind of get up really close and personal into your space. And after about, 2 months or so, they'd turn you into an officer, so to speak. I flew in the Navy. I flew F-18s, Hornets, which was in that last movie, the Top Gun movie. And I did go through Top Gun and became what's called an adversary instructor. So it was really neat. I got to fly these old airplanes, simulating at those days the Russian tactics and stuff like that, and also just teaching air combat, basic fighter maneuvering and stuff, dogfighting, and that was really cool. Then I flew for Delta, and unfortunately I had a bad accident about 10 years ago with a traumatic brain injury. I had ridden motorcycles all my life, and I built a really cool looking chopper. I mean, it's just awesome looking, but it was dangerous as hell. And that's why I have a gold tooth. So, and the funny thing is about that gold tooth, and I had mentioned this earlier, I wanted something to remind me about the fact that, I should have died that day, and I survived. And every time I see the gold tooth, it reminds me of that. But the dentist, he said, "Are you sure you want a gold tooth?" And 3 times he asked me this. And even on the day that they were going to insert it in there, right before he did the procedure, he looked at me and he said, "Are you sure you want a gold tooth?" And I'll tell you another funny story. I've got 5 kids and a bunch of grandkids running around. And every single grandkid at some point has gone up to me like this and looked like this and then touched the tooth. They just are fascinated by it. Man, I've really gotten off topic. Let me think for a minute. Okay, so just getting back, you know, the thing is that I had lost Delta Airlines. I was flying for them. They went bankrupt, and I took about a 50% pay cut, and my pension was stolen or liquidated. A federal judge ruled that they could take our pension, the pilot group, and they did. So I was in a position, not very good position in life. And, you know, it's a later stage in my life. I'm 70 now, but this was years ago. But still, I was later in life, and I thought, man, you know, my life sucks right now. So I started studying finance, and I mean, I really put in some time. And then the great financial crisis happened, 2008. So I got to go through that. That was really fun. And on the other side of that, I actually got to a point where I was doing really well. I mean, I had recovered a lot of my wealth. And then when Bitcoin came along, I was very fortunate because I was so fascinated by Bitcoin. I just studied the shit out of it. I couldn't get enough knowledge about Bitcoin. I just found it one of the most fascinating things. And I've always kind of had an anti-authoritarian bent. You know, I don't like authority. And this was like an escape valve, and I started studying it. And you know, the thing is, at some point I realized this is the royal flush. And I don't know if you play. Do you play poker?
A little bit.
A little bit, just
but
enough
I know
to lose.
Yeah, and just enough to lose and to know the cards.
Well, then you know that if you draw the royal flush,
yes,
you won.
Yeah.
In fact, you can look down on the table, kind of look down there and say, okay, I have won everything that's sitting on that table right there. It's mine. Now, if you're smart, you'll kind of be quiet about it and hopefully get more. But the bottom line is you won. So I felt like at some point I felt like Bitcoin was the royal flush. And I just pushed all my chips in. I went all in on it. And today, you know, I live an incredible life. I mean, my life is just incredible. And I want other people to have that. I want other people to have that life. It's important. And you can have this life that I'm living now.
And it's so interesting because we talked before, and you talked like, oh, like if you're young and now into Bitcoin, like the whole world is kind of opening up. Like you build generational wealth because like we are so extremely early in this movement, in this revolution, whatever you want to call it, and this will open up everything.
It will. It's going to be an incredible life. You are just going to have your eyes watered. Somebody young like you and who's involved in Bitcoin right now, because many people that are going to watch this are going to think they're late to Bitcoin. It's been kind of like the overall theme, I think, this particular cycle. I'm late to Bitcoin. It's too late. It's too expensive, unit bias. And that is not true. We are going so much higher here. We are going to go – this is going up forever, Laura. And that's not just a meme. I mean, that is where it's going. We are going to tap into so much wealth that is misallocated right now, and it's coming. And you will get to see it. You're going to have the most incredible life. You are.
Looking forward to it. I think that there's something with like the 100K. I think there's like this feeling of like, oh, 100, it's like, feels like 100%, like we reached just like things like we reach the top of Bitcoin kind of. That's what I get a lot of the feeling, because first, before we hit the 100K, I was thinking this will wake up a lot of people, but it didn't. Everyone is like, oh, okay, 100K, outside of Bitcoin I'm talking. When I talk with my family, like, oh yeah, 100K, it's reached the top, like, and it's sad to see that.
You know, it is maybe it's a psychological thing, but I think there's more going on right now. It's very interesting because if you look at the ETFs over the past 14 months, primarily the ETFs were retail driven, meaning at one point, I think Van Eck and maybe River came out that, you know, about 75, maybe 80% of the actual volume within the ETFs was probably retail or high net worth individuals, you know, allocating into this asset. And the ETFs have been a relentless, strong underpinning bid to Bitcoin. But the other thing is that institutions are arriving. But the thing is that the institutions are here, and we see it. You know, you see right now the Bitcoin treasury companies that are like taking over the news cycle, but also asset allocators in all manners, hedge funds, pension funds, insurance funds, they're all dipping into this product. But the problem is they're dipping into the product. They're not really, they're just not here in volume. These these allocations that they're putting into the asset class, and this is an asset class. Bitcoin is an asset class now, and that's really unique. There aren't that, if you talk to a financial planner and you ask him, list me asset class, he'll come up with about 8. He'll start with gold and he'll just go through there. But this is unique now. We are here. The problem is that there is no FOMO. Retail's not here. And the other thing is this cycle is different. It's playing out in a different way. The price movement is different. The volatility is different. We are a $2 trillion asset class right now, and it takes a lot to move that. It's like a carrier at sea. When I flew off the carrier, I was just mentioning this the other day in a podcast, and I'll just repeat it very quickly. But when you launch off the end of a carrier, the bow, first off, it's a lot of fun. Imagine you're sitting in your chair right now, and we're just sitting here, okay, and you salute. Well, guess what? At the end of about, a football field or something, you're going to be going 160, maybe 155 miles an hour. So it's a lot of fun. But the problem is when you initially get off the bow of the ship, you take a little cut away, just a little bit. And why are you doing that? Well, because if you go in the water, the ship's going to run over the top of you. And if that captain is on board in the deck there and he says, all stop, it takes 5 nautical miles for the ship to actually come to a stop. It's got inertia. It's got mass. Bitcoin is getting that. We are becoming an aircraft carrier. And when you see us flip gold, which we're going to do, when you see that happen, we're going to be like a battleship. We're going to be cruising along, and it's going to take a lot to move our market up and down. Volatility will compress. But will price? That's the thing. It's not – people get very concerned about this discussion. They think, well, volatility is decreasing. Well, that has nothing to do with where price is going. Price is set on the margin, and we can talk about that later. But when I say on the margin, that's where you're going to find price discovery. So I know I'm kind of wandering around there, but what I want to say is this. Actually, I'll take a break, and then let's come back to the 100K in a minute. But did that kind of explain a little bit of why I think we're here with retail and stuff?
100%, and it's interesting because we have this, first of all, there's still a good amount of people that are concerned that they see all those companies buying, they see the news cycle, and they're like, oh, this company is buying this company is like, oh, why are we still at 100K? Like, is there like a paper rehab publication things going on and stuff like that? And actually, Larry talked yesterday on the stage about that, and it is kind of like, even if it goes on, it cannot go on forever. We saw it with FTX. We saw it with, there's definitely probably something going on, but it's really interesting. If you put it long enough in there, you cannot hide this purchasing power coming up. How do you think about that?
Well, I do know. I was talking to Larry about this. In fact, the other day we were sitting in a square there in Prague talking about this very subject. So, the thing is that TradFi, they think that they understand Bitcoin. And like 99.9%, they don't have a fucking clue about Bitcoin. For instance, I'll tell you why. If you look right now on-chain transaction volume is down. It's significantly down. I mean, you can see it online. Just look at a block. But the actual, I guess I should say the transaction inputs, the throughput, is down, but the size inside those transactions is way up. I mean, it's like averaging $36,000, and like 90% of those transactions are actually 100,000 or above. These are big players that are moving money, but nonetheless, they still haven't discovered the magic of this internet money. If you go to most TradFi people and you say to them, "Okay, hey, guess what? You can send $10,000 of Bitcoin across anywhere you want with final settlement at the speed of light, and it will cost you $1. They'll go, wow, that's incredible. And then, so that's $10,000, and you go to them, and guess what? What do you think it costs to send $1 billion? And they'll go, well, what, $10,000, $20,000, $100,000? And you'll say, no, it's $1. When they start to realize the power of what that means, we are going to see so much global settlement on the base chain in Bitcoin. One of the things I want to talk about with that 100,000 right now is that we're recording on June 20th. It is. I think that within the next 2 to 4 weeks, we are going to see a significant move away from where we are right now. Now, you notice I said away from where we are right now. You know, Bitcoin likes to inflict a lot of pain. I mean, it likes to hurt people. And I actually think there's a very good chance that we're going to have a downside correction first. That's been the case many times with Bitcoin. You know, Bitcoin itself trades within a narrow band about 40% of the time, about 30% of the time up, about 30% down. So trying to time that, as we know, is very difficult. And most of these people that are right now, so open interest is at a huge, I think it's like $96 billion right now while we're recording. And right now the interest rate that's being paid for that open interest in futures markets are about 2.6 or 3%, very low. It shows me that people are kind of asleep at the wheel. I mentioned earlier Bollinger Bands. You know, I follow James Checkmatey.
What are those Bollinger
It's a
bands?
way to kind of measure volatility. Right now they're being squeezed. They're pretty tight together. I would expect if you just look at them, one of the things I like about them is that they have like a mean, which is very easy for people like myself to understand. And then they have standard deviations above and below. And that's also easy for me to understand because I realize that when it gets up around 2 or 3, you know, we're going to see something correct. But what I'm trying to say is people are betting right now on the downside, and yet the actual volatility within this market right now is very low. So I think we're going to see movement. There is pressure building inside this system. And then I think, because I don't believe that the bull market really has even started in earnest, I still think we're going to go significantly higher from here. So people just need to be patient. You don't want to trade Bitcoin. You know, there's no trading in Bitcoin. You just buy the damn thing and then you just hold it. You know, that's why we say hodl. And it's hodl. It's not hodl. I don't know who the hell these idiots are. It's hodl. But anyway, we hodl our Bitcoin. You buy it and you hold on to it.
I had a controversial tweet yesterday about that very meme because I said, like, it's great that we hodl.
Oh, don't say that, hodl. It's hodl.
Hodl. But I said, like, I mean, I'm aware, like, I'm in a special kind of small place where, because I get like 70-80% directly paid in Bitcoin, and this kind of forced me to see Bitcoin not just as a store of value, but actually also as a medium of exchange. And I also pay one freelancer already in Bitcoin, so I try to like increase the size of my Bitcoin cash flow that doesn't even touch any bank or fiat account, which it's just like Bitcoin wallets, which is amazing. By the way, I pay like 70 cents to pay them. It's amazing. And they're in Colombia. And like, if I would have paid the same thing in fiat, I probably would pay like 10, 15 euros and they probably pay like 10, 15 euros. And it's like, oh, 70 cents, 30 euros each month. I'll take the Bitcoin as a medium of exchange. So the point I was kind of making is like, it's early for us to spend Bitcoin, but it's already possible. And now for you, how important is that? I heard Jeff Booth saying like, oh, if Bitcoin fails as a medium of exchange, it will also not succeed as a store of value, which is kind of controversial in Bitcoin. But how do you look at the importance of spending it and the medium of exchange side of things?
I'm glad you brought that up. That's a really good, I hadn't really been thinking about that, but I'm glad you mentioned that because I do think it's very important. And, you know, Jeff Booth is a very smart person. Again, I'm just an 80 IQ pleb drinking a beer here with you and talking. And, you know, my background, again, it's all over the planet, but it's not in finance. But Jeff's very smart. And I do agree with that. You know, last night I also work as an artist, a painter. I've been working as an artist for decades. And, you know, I've screwed up a lot of things in my life. But as an artist, I really work at like a master's level now. You know, if you put in 10,000 hours, the old, 10,000 hours, you can become a master. Well, I have put in more than that in painting, and it's something I'm good at. I hired a model last night from Sweden, and she and I went around the town to get reference photos and stuff, and guess what I did? I paid her in Bitcoin. And I said to her, I want to do this on chain and not Lightning. Now, you and I, you know, we've been in this space for enough time now that for us, we have no issue trying to discuss this, whether Bitcoin is a store of value, will it be immediate? This is easy. But for most normies out there, they're not going to understand what we're really talking about here. For me, first and foremost, yes, Bitcoin is the greatest store of value ever. Bitcoin itself is the greatest monetary invention in the history of mankind. But as a store of value, it's unparalleled, and you can prove it. I mean, over the last 6 years, I think CAGR has been 55%. I mean, over the lifetime, it's been like averaging maybe 200%. I mean, it's incredible. There's nothing like it. It's never been seen before. And people still don't know where it's going. I mean, this is a finite asset. In 9 years, we're going to be essentially capped because at that point, everything we mine will probably be equaled by the amount that's lost. I mean, it's still being lost by people having problems with storage or compromised. And so, I'm not sure. I am concerned about the fact that right now online on blockchain, the transaction volume's down. But I see that if you look at those transactions, they are going up in the actual size of the units within those transactions. Like I said, it's very high. And I think that as this thing takes off, it's almost like we're doing exactly what we've been talking about. What did we say? We want to build layer 2 solutions. Lightning is going crazy right now. What do we want? We want to see more people move off-chain because off-chain is going to be impossible to transact on in the future if it continues, and it will be. In my mind, this is just that lull, and we have a chance to still participate, which is why I wanted to do it on-chain. And the model was she kind of was taken back because she's used to Lightning, and I said no. I said right now that it's not that expensive. There's not much going on, and I want to encourage people to use the network at this particular time until we can get to a place where the blockchain starts filling up again, and it will, and not with these fucking NFTs and ordinals and jack shit nonsense. I mean real money. Bitcoin is money. It's not a data transfer device. This is money. So I hope that answers that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's I love that you're already doing that and like spending and like trying to because I get the value of portraying Bitcoin as a store of value and investment because if we're honest, like that's the thing why everyone is coming in. Oh, the numbers going up. Oh, I store my wealth. Like, oh, I get rich. Like whatever the thing is. That's why I came in, and that's why most people come in. There are a few outliers, of course, but like that's most people. So I get the meme of like hodl and say like, hey, we just buy and hold on to it because most people are not as crazy as me that have 100% of Bitcoin. Like I don't have fiat. I just have a bank account that I use as a pass-through if I have to and transact in fiat. So if you have fiat and Bitcoin, of course spend the fiat. Not even a question. Get rid of that before. So I get that there's a big value in portraying that kind of narrative, but I think just like we should slowly start off like Bitcoin is money, is a medium of exchange, and the sooner we start with that, I think the better it will be. The ecosystem will build out, and yes, now on chain I do everything on chain, but at some point we might pay like a $10, maybe $50, maybe like in the hundreds of dollars.
Yes.
When the blockchain, like the main layer, is filled more up, then I'll move to Lightning and move to maybe a different second layer, whatever the payment solution is, and then we have to build all those things out. And the sooner we start doing that, the sooner we start the process of building that out. And that's why I'm really big on like spending Bitcoin.
I applaud that. And again, now I will say something, in the U.S., I have to be concerned about something, called capital gains and IRS tax reporting. So what I do is, and this is something anyone can do, is I use what I call a fill and spend wallet. And I'm using Aqua right now, but I have a couple other wallets. But I really like Aqua because it's easy to use, very intuitive. I like the fact that they break up your wallet into like a savings and checking account, basically. I think that's really cool. Plus, I support Jan 3's mission. So I use that wallet a lot. I used it last night to make the transaction with the model. And what I was going to say is, I like coming over here, before I go somewhere to spend it, I'll just buy Bitcoin. How nice. I just buy the Bitcoin, put it in the wallet, and then I spend it. And that way I'm using it as a medium of exchange, but I'm also not, subjecting myself to any kind of tax crap. It'd be wonderful. That's one of the things I'd love to see in the U.S. come to fruition is to remove that capital gains on at least some de minimis amount, even if it's $1,000. But I would like to see that removed. If that ever did happen, by the way, just stand the fuck by. I mean, you're going to have a come to Jesus moment. I mean, Bitcoin's going to take off because that is one of the things that holds it back from medium of exchange.
I'm not good with American politics, but I think Cynthia Lummis has a bill where they proposed up till $600, I think, that it's tax-free, something like that.
Yeah, but I don't know if that's going to go anywhere. I will tell you right now that within the U.S. there's the Genius Act just passed, which is stablecoin legislation. A lot of Bitcoiners got pissy with her, and they should sit down on their ass and just kind of read and do some research here because she's been very clear. She said herself, "I'm surprised at how poorly Congress understands Bitcoin." I get constant questions. They're coming into her office. She's got aides that are constantly interfacing with different senators and trying to educate them on what this is. And she just said we need to get the Stablecoin Act passed first, and they're going to. I mean, I think they have enough majority now that it can't be vetoed. And on top of that, she said then we need to have the legislation passed on some kind of regulatory framework for digital assets. Then we can attack the Bitcoin Act and get that passed, which is very important because a lot of the things that we're talking about right here, they're specific to an administration. And if Trump is out of office and let's say there's a blue sweep next cycle, a lot of the stuff that we're seeing right now, all this tailwind behind us, it's just going to be like a sailor at sea that goes into the doldrums, that the sail's going to flap and, we'll be sitting out there going, what the hell happened? So that legislation is important to get passed. I've written both my senators, my House rep a couple times now. I want to see that passed.
Is there any concern of yours that there's something like bad adoption? So what I mean by that is if Satoshi in the beginning was very concerned about getting it out too quick so that it rings some alarm bells and like we're not ready for the next steps. And sometimes like of course institutions comes in, but if it's too quick and the Bitcoin kind of gets centralized and maybe get co-opted and things like that, are you concerned about that at all?
I do. I mean, I do have some concerns here, and I don't want us to go down like a negative road or anything, but I do have some concerns, real concerns, and they are evolving around even just the United States adopting Bitcoin in a strategic reserve is both obviously very positive for Bitcoin. On the one hand, we're talking about adoption, and adoption gives us strength. Adoption is what. The more embedded we are within a system, the harder it is going to pull us out. Bitcoin's like a virus. I mean, it really is. It displays properties of a virus. And if you've studied viruses, in fact, the power law often is used to describe viral progression. Bitcoin's like a virus. I used to like to think of it as like T-Rex, like the apex predator, just because I'm a guy and, But the thing is, it's much more insidious than that because you can hardly kill a virus. They have existed for thousands of years. And if Bitcoin is a virus, how does it embed itself? What would its host be? Well, it's not you and me. The host is really the internet. And how do you kill the internet? Because the ideal virus wants to be with its host, but it never wants to kill the host. In fact, one of the reasons that Ebola has not progressed as dangerous as it is because it kills people so quickly. It can't continue. It just kills them too fast. But you know what? Bitcoin is not like that. Bitcoin is going to slowly inculcate itself within a system just as it's doing now. The problem, though, when I say, these nation states and what I'm concerned about is we are much more subject now to what I call regulatory capture or even seizure. And, I know that some people, laugh at the idea of Bitcoin being seized, but I can say in the U.S., there is a history behind that. Everybody mentions Executive Order 6102, obviously. And I would say that this is much more possible to happen than the seizure of gold was in the 30s, because you and I, we understand whoever has the private key to the Bitcoin, they have the Bitcoin, and it's not that hard to get it. Meaning, once you have those private keys and you transfer, it's yours. I mean, how difficult would it be to seize Bitcoin from a financial institution or from Coinbase or from anywhere? How difficult would it be to put on rails? And I'm not saying that they would be confiscated. I'm saying you'd be paid for it gladly. They just like with gold, they'd give you your fiat cuck bucks and you'd be fine. But then afterwards you'd go, I've got this pile of paper. It's basically, paper confetti. It's like wampum beads. What the hell am I going to do with it? So I do have concerns, but I can't project the future.
I love the virus analogy, and I had, because you brought up the power law 2 episodes before that, I had Giovanni on from the power law, and he said Bitcoin is literally a virus from the adoption perspective, and the power law describes that. How do you like this price models and the power law? It's very controversial in Bitcoin, but I'm not good enough in math and all that. But I'm like, I don't know. Well,
surprisingly enough, I haven't seen that episode. I'm sure it was interesting. Giovanni Santastasi he's a prickly guest, and a prickly person on X. In fact, I'd have to say he's probably his biggest enemy. But he has done a really accurate job and correct job in his math on using the power law to try and describe everything. He's even described it as adoption, hash rate, price. I mean, he's done a lot of work there, and I don't mean to poo-poo it, because we have had cycles in Bitcoin, and we've seen them over and over again. Are we going to have cycles in the future going forward? I'm not so sure about that. I think at some point, when I say that Bitcoin's price is set on the margin, we are going to get to see supply and demand meet on that margin. And you know what I'm talking about here? It's like Bitcoin, when it's trading on a market and just open trading 24/7 every day of the year, people are constantly selling and buying Bitcoin. We talk about supply shocks and squeeze and stuff, but at the same time, for every seller there is a buyer, and for every buyer there's a seller. What they're really negotiating is just price. I mean, that's what the market's about. It's just price. Well, imagine what it's going to be like when they're trading very hard and Bitcoin's moving and very volatile. But at some point you reach exhaustion. And it's at that point, as the volume, it's like on the outside of the Pareto distribution, or on the other side of a curve, or on the right side of the tail. When everything seems like it is exhausted, someone steps in, and it will be a buyer. It will be someone who must have Bitcoin, either a nation state or whatever, and they're going to get it. And that's at the point where we're going to really discover price discovery, because they will be agnostic to price, and they're going to say, I want this much Bitcoin. And we are going to see massive volatility in those periods, just for that brief period. And we will set new discovery there.
When you say set on the margin, you mean that the few people that buy and sell, because like most Bitcoin are just sitting. So those Bitcoin that are traded around, those is kind of the margin, and then like the buyers and sellers make the price.
It's more like the fact that when you have large volume transactions in Bitcoin, at some point, and usually we see this, as either a dip or some rip, and there people finally get exhausted. I mean, let's just say it's a rise in price that just runs out of steam, but it's on that edge where little activity, where it's falling off. That's really what I'm talking about. It's that person that steps in, or institution, and says, I'm buying here, wherever that is, and I must have it. And now we will get to see what that real price is in order to acquire Bitcoin.
The first time I ever made any money, I got myself from that money a watch. And ever since then, I collect timepieces to remember times where I achieved some milestone. That's why I got the Bitcoin 2025 edition when I went to my first ever American Bitcoin conference. So for me, the Bitcoin watches from CoinVigilante represents the time that we are living in. For every person that wears a Bitcoin watch, I know they are representing sound money to the outside world. Make sure to check out those amazing CoinVigilante timepieces down in the descriptions. I love those watches so much. I know how big of a hurdle it can be to have self-custody, but it's so freaking important to make that first step. We have to make sure it's as easy and simple as possible. And that's exactly what BitBox did. BitBox created the simplest and the easiest hardware wallet to use to get into self-custody. So get yourself a BitBox down from the link in the description. And when you use code Robin, you even get a 5% discount. The most important thing for your Bitcoin journey is not buying Bitcoin, but it's how to keep them. And yes, you have maybe the right tools, but how do you actually go ahead and stick it all together so it's the most secure for you personally? Self-custody is a deeply personalized journey, and the Bitcoin way is helping you exactly finding that correct setup for you personally. They are also helping you with securing your own cybersecurity. And if you want to go one step above all that, you can even get a consultation for a Plan B residency. Go to thebitcoinway.com/Robin and you will get a 30-minute free consultation. Interesting, yeah. I love that. I also want to touch on that, and we started in the car to talk about that, about the op return, the nodes, Bitcoin Core, the whole thing. Maybe before we got started with like what this even is, make sure for the viewers to understand why it's so important to run a node, because I'm very certain that I would say probably like 50%, probably a lot more, don't run a node that currently listening. I know that around 50% do self-custody, like self-custody is the first step. I feel like running a node is behind self-custody. More people do self-custody than running a node. So why should someone run a node?
Yeah, I'd have to say that it's a lot less than what you're saying. I mean, I think there's a lot fewer people running a node. You know, I have seen figures that there are 60 or 70,000 nodes out there reachable, but that's not in the past. At least recently, I calculated about 20,000 nodes. That was probably a year ago, so I'm not sure where it sits right now. But the thing is that, you know, you have to realize that when Satoshi was bringing Bitcoin to the world in those early years, I mean, everybody ran a node. I mean, you had to. If you were going to interact with Bitcoin in the app, I mean, you had a node. You were, that's what it was. And so the reason why it's so important to run a node, first off, let's face it, if you're going to interact with that blockchain, like, you know, I sent Bitcoin across the blockchain last night. Well, if you're going to interact there, you must have a node. You will never interact with Bitcoin unless you have a node. Now, if you're saying, well, I don't have a node, well, guess what? That means you're using somebody else's node. They definitely have one. All these concentrated mining pools, they have nodes, multiple nodes. If you're using a wallet, you know, you're using someone's node. Like, you know, if it's a Trezor or something, you're using their node unless you run your own. And you can. I have a cold card wallet that I have used in the past, and I have Sparrow as my desktop software. And you can incorporate that into your node, and then you can assure yourself, I guess, that you really do have possession of your Bitcoin, or that you're sending it. You know, you can see it. But more importantly, you know, getting away from that discussion, more importantly is the power of Bitcoin nodes is that they basically enforce the protocol. And when I say that, what I'm talking about is, for instance, the block size war. You know, it was the node runners. There were a lot of powerful interests, very powerful interests. And it was the node runners who said, basically put their hand out and said, no, we're not doing this. We're not going to be increasing these blocks. There was negotiation and attempts to come to a compromise, but the node runners stood firm in their belief that, no, we're going to keep the blocks the way they are. And why is that important? Because you know what? That means that ordinary people like you and myself can run a node. Now, again, if you look at me, I'm a boomer, and so that means it takes like 3 boomers to open a PDF file. And I'm not technology proficient in some regards, but they make nodes now. There's no excuse. I'm saying right now that Bitcoin is going to go a lot higher. And I'm also saying that, you're going to see, actually right now already, there should be people within this system that have received a tremendous windfall in their assets over this last year. Well, guess what? Do something with those. Give back to the network. Give back to Bitcoin. And how you should do that is run a node. And for somebody like me, I've always said that I'm not going to – I've tried in the past to run a node using, Raspberry and buying the hardware and putting it together and stuff. And it was such a pain in the ass. And, I got tired of it after a while. And I just said, you know what? I'm going to wait until the technology catches up and they have what I call plug-and-play units. Well, they've got them now. And I just bought one recently. I bought a My Node 2. And it was, I think it was like $500 or something like that. And it truly is plug and play. I mean, I actually plugged it into the Ethernet cable and I sat there on the screen, watched it. It's got a lot of capability, a lot of apps on it. It's synced with the network. It did really well. It went really fast because, it's new, more modern equipment till it got to about 2023. And again, when the, jackass movement showed up and, the ordinals, NFTs, and all that other crap, then it slowed down in the sync. It took a while. But after about 5 or 6 days, I think it finally synced up. And now I'm running my own node. And guess what I did? Just to kind of, flip the finger to these core developers and this recent attitude and controversy over op return, I'm running Bitcoin knots. And I suggest anyone else going forward that you study this, but I personally suggest that you run Bitcoin knots. And I'm telling you right now, there are people listening. We have gone from like just over 2% of the nodes running Bitcoin knots. I think it was maybe like 6 weeks ago. Now it's going skyrocketing. It's like a hockey stick. I mean, it's straight up. It's up at about, while we're recording here, it's around 13. Somebody mentioned 15% yesterday. I don't know if that's true. And what's really funny is some of the core developers and people involved in that on that side of the issue said, "Oh, well, those aren't real nodes. You couldn't have had 900 nodes show up like overnight or something like that." You're wrong. Okay, you're wrong. I'll tell you what it is. You've pissed off people. You've pissed off people like me. You finally got me off my lazy ass so that I'm running a node and I'm running knots. And I may know that I'm running Core's software basically, except for a few extra filters. But you know what? That movement's not going to stop. And they've really they've screwed this up. I'll tell you right now. Their messaging system, they need a marketing department because they have really messed this message up.
I could imagine there are a lot of people that are like, up return nods, like what the hell is he talking about? On an easy scale, why is that issue important and why did it piss you off?
So, first off, obviously, I'm not a software developer. I couldn't write a line of code without Grok or something and I couldn't do it. But what is the issue here? I'll tell you how to frame this, okay? What is Bitcoin? Is Bitcoin money? In my mind, it is. It's the most important monetary invention in the history of man, and we have to win. We can't lose this battle, and we are in a battle, and we have to win. Or is Bitcoin a data transmission device? Are we just a software protocol, transmitting JPEGs and other shit like that? Or are we money? In my mind, we're money. What this discussion revolves around is not as important. When I say op return, what I'm talking about is the fact that when I run knots, I am attempting, not 100% successful, but it is successful. I mean, you can look and see that Knots does filter spam. And I consider everything that I mentioned earlier spam. I don't think it belongs on the network. And it's wrong. It's morally and ethically wrong to run that shit on our monetary network. And the reason I say that is because when you put your grandma's, face on Bitcoin, or you put on some fucking rock or a dog or whatever the hell it is you're putting on there, you're burdening people in the future. Without their consent, you are telling them, you know what, some poor guy in Africa that's finally trying to get onto the Bitcoin network and wants to run a node, he's going to have better equipment. It's going to cost more. He's going to have a better internet connection. You are burdening people in the future. And I'm against that. I see Bitcoin as money. So everything that's being done to try and filter these pricks off the network, I'm going to support. And, there are people out there that are standing like guardians right now, taking a tremendous amount of flack. They've got arrows sticking out of every part of their body right now because they're taking a lot of flack and heat from people that are on the other side of this controversy. And how I want to kind of frame this, too, is the fact that there are some really important things that are going to happen out of this. For one thing, there are so many people that are working for Bitcoin Core and developers. They're great people, and they're working for what we all want. The problem is the messaging that came out of this whole controversy too. You had people like Shinobi and Jameson Lopp, basically. And if you're listening, I want you to know here's the message that you gave me, George. You're an idiot. You're not a software developer. You've never written a line of code. You don't know what you're talking about. You don't have a voice in this discussion. And if we don't like what you're saying, like you did with Mechanic, we're going to censor you. We're going to block you, even if it's for a day, just to show you that we have the power and the control. And then when there's no consensus behind the movement, because there's no consensus, there's nobody in this Bitcoin conference that's coming up to me and saying, well, we need to run these whatever. We need to open up op return so we can put more stuff in the blockchain. Nobody's saying that. This is something you're pushing. And so when people are pushing an agenda and they don't have a consensus behind them, what does that tell you? It makes you nervous. It makes you not trust them. And I don't trust them anymore. So you have really messed this up. And there are things that are important right now in Bitcoin. One, for covenants, I want to have a discussion about covenants in BIP 119. Jeremy Rubin, I want to see these things discussed. There might be some really good things going forward, but if we don't fix this, we are going to ossify. This discussion will be over. We'll be sitting here recording today, and we'll be done. Put a fork in it.
It reminds me when there are people saying like, "Oh, we are the experts. We are software developers." It's kind of like traditional TradFi, mixing a lot of complicated words in there to make it sound like, "Oh, like we are the experts," and like you don't know what you're doing. Give me your money. I'll handle it for you. And this is sounds like, oh, yeah, you're just making it more complicated. You're just like thinking because you're the one software developer, you get to decide. I am actually by trade a software developer. I coded 3 years for a company, but still, like, it doesn't qualify me to say like, oh, that's how Bitcoin should be. Software develop just means like, oh, you better understand how to do it, but the why and the whole reason why we need those things, I actually saw that non-software developers sometimes understand it better because they're like too focused on the techniques. So this is kind of discarding, which is not good. Like even no matter who's right, like no matter like on what side you're standing, my point is like, don't put your title, your profession as a guardian angel of like, oh yeah, I don't even need to listen to your opinion. That's like very wrong in general.
Yeah, and it's unnecessary. And the funny thing is, I mean, I've been wrong endlessly. I have been like a village idiot when it comes to investing. I've gotten all kinds of things wrong. I originally got Bitcoin at a very good price, and I ended up selling it when it went up. I never made that mistake again. When I went back into Bitcoin, I haven't sold any Bitcoin other than using it like we talked about. So anyway, that's just my 2 cents on it. I hope from a layman's point of view, I hope I've kind of laid that out to people. I just think it's very important. And, again, if you've got increased wealth this year, do something with it. Get a node. I've mined in the past, just had some units, and I'm going to end up getting some more units, and I'm going to direct my mining hash rate to Ocean. I support that mining pool. I support their mission, and they're doing a great job, and I appreciate it. I'm grateful for this because of the mining pool concentration.
Is that mining pool concentration, especially with the templates, maybe an even bigger problem?
Yeah, it is a problem. I mean, it is a severe problem. I mean, I often say, and I say, well, Bitcoin can't fail now, and what I mean by that is, Bitcoin's not going to go away. It's not going to go to zero. It's not going to have a collapse. But this mining pool concentration is another threat vector, and it needs to be, in my mind, it has to be corrected. This is another thing that Satoshi never he did not foresee this. And I use he because of his posting online before he disappeared. He did not understand this, or this is something he did not see. Just as I mentioned about running a node and stuff, people were mining, they were using their computers. We never, in those early days, they didn't understand how this would, come about, this concentration of mining pools. Because if I buy 10 or 20 miners, I'm going to, because of the economics behind mining, I'm going to take that hash rate that I produce, and I'm going to send it to a pool. And then they're going to pay me by FPPS or something. It'll be some share, based upon what I contribute to the hash rate. But from that point there, that means that I'm giving up a lot of control to that mining organization. Right now, if you look at Antpool or you look at Foundry has got, I think they were at 30. I haven't looked at it in a while, but maybe like 36% or something of the hash rate, maybe a little bit less, 30. But the thing is, between those and Antpool has all these ancillary mining pools. They're listed differently. Like if you go and look at a pie chart, it looks like they're different mining pools. They're not. They're basically all in China, and they're controlled by, essentially the CCP. Because again, it's almost like the U.S. government. If the CCP comes into a mining pool and says, you're going to do this, they will do this. If they tell them to jump so high, they're going to jump that high. So it's a tremendous concentration of the mining pools, and it's dangerous. And the real problem is the fact that they are creating, you already mentioned it, you said it, templates. That's where, the issue is in this template creation. That's where the power lies. And so it is a threat.
It's actually, this is one topic that I discovered a few months ago. I'm like, oh, that whole mining template thing, that could be an actual problem with censoring transactions. And so I started, got the simplest way to get like an S21 running, and I pointed to Ocean. I think I have like 600,000, 700,000 Satoshis. I'm nearing my first payout, because like at 1 million Satoshis, you get your payout, because I don't opt in for the Lightning, I opt in for like the on-chain thing. So it's been fun. The first time ever in my life I'm starting to mine, because like I have to get involved in this thing, and this is really important for people, not just like, not only Orange Pill, not only be someone that holds Bitcoin, not only self-custody. Like there's a funnel, like first you have it on exchange, then you get self-custody, then you run, you buy like a miner. And I know like people are like, oh, but mining is not like a financially good decision, buy just a Bitcoin. I'm like, even if I make slightly less Bitcoin, I support the network. You make, well, like if you bought one Bitcoin a year ago, you made roughly like $50,000 with that. It's okay to support the network. We're early.
I just applaud that. That's terrific. It's really nice to hear. And how great a young guy like yourself. Again, this is your future, and I just applaud that. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to get a couple of new miners here soon, and direct my hash rate to Ocean for the kind of the same reason. And I'll explore the template creation and see if I want to do that on my own also. It's so important because, the templates are the key. These mining pools, they get to decide what transactions are included in the block, and they do that through the template creation. There is no the mempool, meaning there's not one mempool. Every one of these nodes creates a mempool, and then we fill it with the transactions, and they can censor or enter these mining pools, enter transactions. Slipstream by Mara is a program that does that. They're using, usually it's these JPEGs and other shit that they're putting on there, and sometimes they're not sure they're going to get into a block, so they'll just bypass that template creation, and they'll go directly to Mara, and they mine enough blocks that they'll know they'll get in. They pay a premium for that. And that's another reason why filters work. You know what? Force those pricks to go to Slipstream and pay a premium to get onto the blockchain. But anyway, that's really encouraging, and I'm glad that you're doing that. And I hope other people, even these small BitX units, you've seen my studio before and on the screen. I've got that picture of Dorian Nakamoto behind me, the painting, and that painting's mining Bitcoin. It's got a little BitX in it. And it's fun, if you ever looked at if you look at the odds, surprisingly enough, because it runs 24/7 all the time, your odds are better than usually like just playing the lottery to win a major payout. And so I think it's fun. I do it, and now it's becoming ubiquitous. It's everywhere. It seems like you're seeing them, grow and adoption. That's terrific. I really support that. And for $300-400, you can get a really cool unit and put it somewhere. And when you come into your office, your desk, your studio, your room, your whatever, you can see. You'll usually go over like I do and see if I want a block.
There's some luck there. I think that not two.
Oh, and more than that. It's more than that. I don't know what it is, but it's more than that. I think. I'm talking about solo block mining too. Sometimes it's just somebody renting block space in either. But maybe, several of these BitX I think have already won a block.
Which is crazy. It's a lottery. It's amazing to have you get 3.125 Bitcoin for that. That's awesome.
Yeah, well, exactly. And the fees aren't real high. I think the last time I walked through the studio, it had a price on there of $310,000 or something. But that'd be pretty cool because of Bitcoin. Bitcoin's going to be worth so much someday, and every Bitcoin is going to be precious. A tenth of a Bitcoin is going to be precious. Yeah, it's going to be worth so much money in the future.
I always say 0.1, so 1/10 for Bitcoin is generational wealth. People get mad at me because they underestimate Bitcoin.
Well, you know what? Let's talk about that for a minute. That's wrong. A tenth of a Bitcoin will be generational wealth. And how to look at it is, and I've mentioned this before, and this is going to draw some flack here, but let's just use a tenth of a Bitcoin, $10,000 right now, approximately. And that CAGR that I mentioned yesterday, that cumulative annual growth rate, it's about 55%. So go ahead. Go online right now. If you're watching or you're listening to this, just go do it. Go on there and type in reverse CAGR calculator, CAGR calculator, reverse. And you're going to put in three things. You're going to put in the amount. We'll put in $10,000. You're going to put in the CAGR that you expect going in the future. Now, just for fun, stick in 55%. And then stick in, let's do some math here and have some fun. So at the end, that tenth of a Bitcoin at the end of 10 years, it's 300,000. And you go, well, Jesus, Jethro, that's not that much. But what people don't understand is, this is like it's like trying to understand exponential growth. It's the guy that's sitting at the bottom of a huge soccer stadium or football or whatever the hell you call it. And he's down there sitting there on the ground. And you're up at the top bleacher there and you're looking down there. And he turns on a faucet and he puts on a drip, 1 drip per second. 44 minutes later, he floods the entire stadium. It's filled with water. It's very difficult. So the reason I say that is go out 20 years, use the same calculator, and suddenly from $290,000, it goes up to almost $9 million in just another 10. That doesn't make sense, does it? 300 and then jumps way up. Well, guess what? If you're a young guy like you and you just keep that tenth of a Bitcoin stuck somewhere in a wallet, you know what it comes out to at the end of 30 years? It's $240 million. Now, immediately people are going to push back and they'll say, well, there's no way Bitcoin's going to have a CAGR of 55%. And they might be right. But a CAGR of 55% over the next 10 years, I definitely could see that without any problem at all. And nobody knows where Bitcoin's price is going, meaning that in 10 years, if I'm right, I think it's going to go way up. I mean, it's going to be, it'll be 15, 20. I think it's going to be magnitudes higher that we can't really understand. And then just go out there to 10 or 20 years and say, you know what, by this time, it's going to be everywhere. It'll flood the system. CAGR will drop. Well, then stick whatever amount you got in there, take that 9 million and stick in 20% CAGR and take it out another 10 years. You're still going to have your eyes watered. All you have to do, it's the magic of holding an asset like Bitcoin. You just get a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to do this. So, get that Bitcoin. Don't lose the Bitcoin. HODL the Bitcoin, and you'll be set. You'll be set for life. You're going to have the best life ever.
I 100% agree with this message. That's awesome, man. And I think this point of people don't get exponential growth. I always liked and you made the trip example of like filling up the full stadium. I love that, and I heard that the first time when I think you mentioned it on the second or like the first episode we did also, and I also love the example of folding paper.
Oh
like,
yeah, it takes. It's only like, oh God, I haven't thought about that in a while, but it's maybe it's like 40.
I think it's 42, and then you're on the moon.
That. Yeah, and you're on the moon. You're sitting on. You're on the moon. Now think of that. Just if I held up a little piece of paper there and you just fold it over once, it's not a big deal. In fact, 10 times. What's interesting about that is, like that example I gave you in the stadium. Guess what? After like, I don't know, 30 minutes or so, you can't even see anything down there. There's just some puddles. It all happens at the end, which is an amazing thing to see.
Yeah, this is examples of like, you started and like, 70% in, like, okay, I see a little, like there's a little, and then whoop, I'm underwater.
Exactly.
One last thing that I want to touch on before we get to the end routines is we are very early in the Bitcoin community, and we might come to a point, and I talked yesterday with the guest here with Daniel about the rules changing, and like we have a chessboard and the whole game is changing with Bitcoin. And when we think about this new Bitcoiner class that obviously will accumulate a lot of wealth, like if we think about now Michael Saylor, 500,000 Bitcoin, we think about OGs that maybe have like 1,000 or 10,000 Bitcoin somewhere. Then we think about people that even have like a whole coin or 0.1, even that will be like generational, huge amount of wealth. What if, like what happens in 10, 20, 30 years if Bitcoin is successful and then all those people have this wealth and we have kind of this shift of now we are controlled by fiat-minded people, and what happens when there's like Bitcoin people on top? And also what do you think is the responsibility of, let's say like my generation up until like 30, 40 years old to have like, how can we make this Bitcoin revolution better than ever? What should we kind of focus on the next 40, 50 years to make the world actually a little bit better in our existing with Bitcoin?
Yeah, that's a powerful thing to talk about, because when I say that it's going to be a big, bright future, I'm picturing it's your generation, it's younger people, it's people under 40 that are going to change this world. You need to get people like myself. We need to step aside and be gone. And that's coming. It comes for everyone. But for the people that have been in a position of power and privilege for a long period of time, their term is ending. And as an aside, at the end of your life, when you finally take your final breath and you go down to the river Styx and the boatman takes you across the river forever, you don't take anything with you. You go out with a toe tag. And I used to be a cop, and I mean I've seen some shitty stuff, and nobody ever, when you leave, you have nothing on but either you just go out with nothing. You don't take any sats. No sats go with you. And that's important to understand. No Lambos, nobody's going to chase you around and take your wealth with you across the river Styx. And you'll look back. You'll have a chance to look back and see what you left behind. What you're going to leave behind are memories that people have of you and what you did on this planet. And I have great faith in younger people that are coming behind me because, you know, I can ask you right now, do you like these endless wars? Are you enjoying, you know, dropping bombs and killing people?
No.
No. Do you enjoy, you know, seeing people, this wealth concentration and inequality continue?
Of course not.
And so that's up to you. It's on your shoulders. You know, people like myself will be gone. It's on you whether you're going to change that. When I talk about generational wealth, I mean not just within your family, but you can change the world. There are going to be people going forward that can use that Bitcoin that they've accumulated to develop side chains, almost like a bank or Fediment. And basically, that really what is Fediment? You know, trusted elders with the bank that can change an entire world for a small village or a town or a community or a county or everything from a hilltop town in Italy to, you know, a village in Africa that's struggling with water. You can be that person that enables all that change. And you, going forward, you're not ever going to have to sell your Bitcoin. I know people, and again, I'm not talking about hoarding it like you're going to take it with you, but what I'm trying to say is you won't be forced to. You're going to have enough wealth in your life, and you'll be able to generate yield off of Bitcoin. It's coming. You know, one of the most revolutionary starburst, an explosion that just caught my eye was Block's capture of the Lightning Network with one of their nodes and providing liquidity. That was unbelievable. I think they reported they were running like a $10 million node with liquidity in Lightning, and finally they achieved what many people like Fidelity just came out with a report discussing this. They achieved 10% yield on that, and they made $1 million on that node annually. And they did it just through transaction volume. That's where things are going. And you are going to have an asset that everybody on this planet wants. And you will be able to command a premium for it. You'll be able to receive loans that are SOFR, the overnight funding rate, plus maybe 1 or 2%. So right now, today, that'd be like a 5.5% loan that you'd be able to get and do something with it. And you know you hold an asset that accumulates more than that every year. So when I say you're going to have the most beautiful, bright future in Bitcoin, that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about you're going to be in a position where you can change the world. And aren't you tired of these fiat pricks just, printing all this shit? Like I said, it's just paper. It's like colored confetti. It's like a wampum bead that they're giving us. And I'm tired of it. And, I'll bet younger people are a lot more tired of it than I am. So, you do have to give back. Again, you run a node, just like I said, start, contributing hash rate, even if it's just to get a cool looking BitX and play around with that and, send it to somebody that's ethically and morally aligned with both the Bitcoin network and yourself as a human being. And then in the future, as you go forward, live that life as your principle. When I get up every day, I have 4 principles I try and live by. Honor, integrity, strength, and kindness. And at the end of the day, I fall short sometimes. Usually it's kindness, but I'm working on that. I'm trying. And, that's the other thing. When you cross that river Styx, when the boatman comes for you and it's the end, you'll leave that behind. That's all you leave are the memories and the things that you did on this planet.
That's beautiful. I'm really looking forward to this.
It's going to be a great time, Robin.
That's awesome. We have one question to ask each and every one of my returning guests. And the question is, what have you learned since you have last been on the podcast outside of Bitcoin?
Well, I'm trying to, I'm doing a series sometimes of postings on X that I call the Bitcoin Life. And what I'm trying to do is I want people to have the vision, the picture of what we're talking about here. The idea that if you will just stay focused on doing what I said, just get as much Bitcoin as you can, don't try and trade this thing, don't try and necessarily time it, just continue to stack Bitcoin. It's still a buying opportunity in my mind, not financial advice. And you will see your world change. I'm getting to see a glimpse of it now because of the fact that I had a stack that I had built up from that crisis and that terrible time in my life, and I took that stack and I just went into Bitcoin. Well, guess what? I'm getting to see that life. And what is that life? Time has changed for me. Time stretches out. I'm not rushed. I'm not pushed. I have freedom in thought. And, another thing, I really don't give a shit what people think anymore. I mean, of me personally. I'm more concerned about how I feel about myself at the end of the day when I look in the mirror. Then I don't really care about other people's thoughts about me. And I don't care about, these shitheads out there that are printing money and these things that they're doing that are not aligned with what I want. Guess what? I really don't care. Go ahead, print the shit out of the money if you want, because I live free of that. I'm in a standard where you can do whatever you want to the monetary supply, and basically it just helps me. So I'm getting to see what this is like, and I'm getting to travel more. I just took up, I'm doing the things that I'm interested in. I took up scuba diving recently. I'm going to start flying again, but a different kind of flying. I'm in an old biplane. I'm going to end up getting back into like stick and rudder flying. No, not really instruments, just stick and rudder and flying. And I'm looking forward to that. And I'm finding that I'm just not worried about things. And I'm thinking about the future for my children and grandkids. And I'm thinking about what I'm going to leave to them and the legacy that is behind. And you'll see that too. So that's been a big change in my life, to have that glimpse, and I'm just trying to paint that to people.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love your Twitter posts. They're really cool. You're doing a great job on Twitter. I always make sure from every guest I have the Twitter profile in there, so like people can check it out and see for themselves. I really enjoy that one. Thanks. Really cool. As you know, we have an end routine in the podcast where the previous guest is asking a question for the next guest without knowing who the next guest actually is. And the previous guest asked you the question, if Bitcoin would be a sport, what sport would it be?
Blood sport.
Blood sport?
Blood sport. It'd be a hardcore knock 'em down, get up. I mean, a battle of the ages.
Like boxing or?
Oh, or gladiator. Think gladiator. Oh, nice. Think Bitcoin is not for the faint of heart. And the good news is that most Bitcoiners are not faint of heart. We are a warrior class. I mean, that's where we come from. And it doesn't mean that we have to be constantly fighting and killing. What I'm talking about is just constantly battling for survival. It was just 10,000 years ago that, our ancestors, your ancestors, your ancestors 10,000 years ago were running around with pointy rocks on the end of sticks and killing things, and then they'd sit there and eat it. One of the favorite things to get was a mammoth, a woolly mammoth. And in fact, most large animals went extinct around 10,000 years ago when human beings, and I'm not saying this is attributed, it's not necessarily causation, but, when we settled down and we stopped roaming around the planet and became, farmers instead of hunter-gatherers. And that changed a lot of things. And so I would think it'd be just think of yourself with a pointy rock on the end of a stick and woolly mammoths, and that's the kind of thing Bitcoin is, because you've got to be tough. Volatility is not for the faint of heart, and we've had a very good period here with reduced volatility, but we will see volatility going forward again. It will be brief, but it's going to be severe sometimes, and you're going to get shaken out if you don't put on the warrior spirit and start thinking about that.
That's beautiful. I love that. I usually ask my guests before we stop, where can people find you, but we just covered that on Twitter. I think that's the best place for you.
Yeah, if you just type my name, George Bodine, into the internet, Google, I'm the first thing that comes up. So
awesome. Then thank you so much, George, for being on the show. It was really a pleasure talking with you.
Oh, it's been great, Robin. I'm so glad, and a toast to all of the Bitcoiners out there. We are going to work this out. It's going to be a great future. Cheers.
Thank you so much for joining us today. As always, I'll be back tomorrow with another episode. Bye-bye.